Going live, and we are live. Art, welcome back. I'm so ready for part two. Um, how's it going?
It
How's your week?
is going awesome. I am glad to be here.
Well, I am glad to have you here. I last week I got a lot out of, especially the feeding the story at the end, and your point about the wild man energy being king energy. That's been sticking with me all week, like almost to the point where I'm shifting from the wild man, like pursuit of the wild man and bring back the wild man to pursuit of king energy. Where is the king energy? Where is the mentorship for king energy? Where are the spaces where the king energy is honored and welcome? So just the one little stream we did last week has kind of shifted my thinking around that. So I'm excited to see what happens today.
Me too. I'm always excited to see what comes from the discussions. It's always a beautiful journey wherever it takes us.
Yeah, today is the mentor, like the actual mentorship and the like he's in the forest, he's on the bed of moss.
Yep. He's about to wake up for his first day in the forest and to face his first day of the trial with the spring.
Cool. I remember that part, and there's it resonated with me a lot in many ways. So I can't wait for the feeding. I'm just to like give people a chance to show up if they want to. I'm gonna post it one more time on social media. And okay, so like 1 or 2 minutes, and then we can start. Do you have
Very
anything
cool.
you want to say, or anything this past week related to the story that came up for you?
Every time I feed a story, I always get a little something out of it that always changes my perspective on the story. And last week was really a whirlwind week for me, just within my own personal life, and just having the ability to sit and feed the story brought a lot of grounding to me. And the the moment when the boy decides to go and get the key has always been a pivotal moment to me, because it always really resonates for me how we have to make an active intentional choice to step out onto our journey and claim our journey. And that's really that moment for the boy within the story when he does that, when he makes the decision to sneak into his parents' room and collect the key from underneath his mother's pillow. And I know that symbology has really resonated with a lot of people over time. And so it's a moment in the story that always really strikes me.
That's when he knows where the key is. He knows it's under the mother's pillow, but he
Yep.
has it. Got okay. I know that the mother's pillow thing comes up a lot. Like why the mother in particular has the key and having to steal the key from the mother.
Yeah, it really speaks to me in that moment of deciding to step out on the hero's journey. It's our first active, intentional choice in our youth of stepping out of that adolescence and stepping onto of adulthood when it happens at that age that it's happening within the story. In our modern world, we become adults without even knowing what adulthood is, or necessarily having the opportunity to go through an initiation period in order to really understand the transformation we're stepping through. And so the hero's journey work that I do, I'm bringing a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s to realization of, wow, my hero's journey has been with me and following me my whole life. I just have not been consciously walking it or intentionally choosing to. And the idea that even late in life, I can make this choice to claim my purpose and to start following it and doing it, uh, it really heavily strikes a lot of people when they're told for the first time in their life that you can, instead of being told that they can't, or following after the large array of our world's illusions and fantasies and misdirection and misinformation that we have to wade through.
Yeah. Well, I'm still trying to figure out what adulthood is, and I'm an elder. So hearing that these all these other age groups in the same boat, and embarking on the journey a lot of times takes you outside of the lines or outside of the normal bounds of society or the expectations and rules that you grew up in the confines of. And I think the stealing the key is a good indication of that too. So like
Yeah,
the hero's journey is it's your own path. It's not necessarily the path laid out by society. So
exactly.
you have to be prepared to walk your own road when you need to.
It's an individual experience, but it was always meant to be supported by community. And that's one of the reasons why I'm creating and doing what I'm doing and building a supportive community around the material that I've published, is to be able to have groups come together alongside of each other and support each other in following our dreams and support each other in claiming our purpose. Uh, in the days of the old stories, when we did have the elders leading the rites of initiation, the community at large did support the individual purpose as it related to the benefit of the whole community. Whereas now I see a very individualized me, very competitive society, and we all have to follow a same track of success and bigger homes, faster cars, who's got the better job, higher status, smarter kids, more athletic kids, and this competitiveness that pervades our society. Uh, More often than not, when I go out and I express, hey, this is a dream, I'm going to go try and do this, I'm going to go build this, I get a lot more, oh, that's never going to happen kind of comments. Our world doesn't allow for that. Or, you'd have to win the lottery or be one of the lucky few to be able to do what you're talking about doing. And that's not a supportive community. And it makes it very difficult to want to step out and go after your dreams when the chorus of voices around you are telling you you can't. And that's been an experience I've had.
Yeah, I just ignore those. But that comes easy to me. I agree that the community element is missing, which is one thing you're trying to do. I'm trying to do, and I also think the path of what constitutes heroism or what can has been narrowed and restricted too. So finding new ways of like finding what heroism is and how it's not always going to fit the expected models that are given to us today. And I think it is important to note that the hero's journey is not a path to status. Like status may or may not accompany it along the way, but that's not the goal of the hero's journey, is to attain status. It's heroism. It's an internalized goal of self-development. So if you're looking for that house and that car, the hero's journey path may not take you there. It may not be the path that gets you to that, but it's going to get you to what the hero's journey is designed to get you to.
Yes.
We have a couple of people that are showing up in the waiting room. Do you want to let them in now, and you can do
Yeah,
the
we might
story,
as
and they
well get
can?
them in now.
Okay.
That way we can jump into the discussion right afterwards.
We have Jimmy, Sam. Uh, Hi, Jimmy. Hi, Sam. Can you hear us? Okay. Jimmy can hear. Oh, now it says Arthur. Are you Sam?
That
Oh, hang on. I don't know what's going on. So I tell you what, we're gonna come. We're gonna start the story and just show up after the story, and we'll let you back in because I'm not sure what's going on right now, and I don't want to interrupt the story. So just try again after the story is over, about 10 or 15 minutes. I think some of that might have been spam. Okay, so part two, he's in the bed in the forest, and the trial of the spring.
Indeed. So here we go. As we enter into the story, I like to call up upon the ancestors of the story to bring the story into the room with us, to journey with us and guide and lead the story where it is the story will go. I also like to invite others, as I myself invite my faith to come in and walk and sit beside me. And as we join the story, we join our king's boy as he awakes upon the bed of moss within the forest after having spent his first night away from home. And so it was that the king's boy awoke that morning, having slept very soundly upon his bed of moss. And that morning, Iron John led him to a golden spring filled with light. And he instructed the boy to sit in front of the spring and not to let anything fall into the spring, for it would wrong the spring. And Iron John left for the day and left the boy to sit. And as the boy sat, he was very determined not to let anything fall into the spring. Occasionally, he would see a golden fish or a golden snake within the waters. But as he sat there, his wounded finger from the day before, when he freed the wild man from the cage, hurt something fierce. And before he quite realized what he was doing, he dipped his finger into the spring. Withdrawing it immediately, he realized that it had turned to gold. He tried to wash it, but to no avail. His finger did remain gold. And that evening, when Iron John returned, he hid his finger behind his back. And Iron John asked, "Did anything happen with the spring today?" "Why, no, nothing at all." "Ah, I see. You have dipped your finger within the spring. Well, we will let it go this once. And we will try again tomorrow." And again the boy slept upon the comfortable, mossy bed, and in the morning was instructed to sit beside the spring once more, and not let anything fall into the spring. And Iron John left the boy there for that day. Well, as he sat, he was determined not to dip his finger into the spring and to ignore the pain in his finger. But within his restlessness, he ran his fingers through his hair, and as it happened, a single hair fell from his long, long hair into the spring. Fishing it out immediately, it was too late and had already turned to gold. Well, he hid the hair. And when Iron John came home again that night and asked the boy if anything had happened with the spring, and the boy once again replied that nothing had, Iron John knew that a hair had fallen in the spring. And he instructed the boy that he would let it go one last time, and that tomorrow, his third day, would be the last day, and that If anything were to fall into the spring and wrong the spring a third time, he would have to leave the forest. Well, he slept again upon the bed of moss and awoke to sit before the spring. And that day, as he stared into the water, stared into his own reflection, gazing, leaning, staring, he desired to stare intently into his own gaze, to look inward. And as he leaned forward, his long head of hair fell over his eyes and his face. The tips dipped into the water, and his entire hair turned to gold. Well, he tried to hide it with a handkerchief tied around his head. But Iron John knew immediately, and upon returning home instructed the boy to remove his handkerchief. The boy did so sheepishly, and Iron John informed him that he did not pass the trial and that he would have to leave. He was allowed to sleep one more night upon the bed of moss. And in the morning, Iron John awoke with him and led him a little distance into the forest. And as he bade the boy farewell, he spoke. Since you did not pass the trial, you must now go out into the world and learn what poverty is. But I see no evil in your heart, and so I give to you this gift. Have you any need of aid from me, come to the edge of the forest. Call Iron John, and I will come. For I have more power, silver and gold than you could imagine, and I will help you. And so the boy left. He wandered on through the forest to the other side where there was another great kingdom. A large, bustling city, larger than the one that he had come from. And there he looked for work. But he could find nothing and learn nothing. And so he went unto the court of the castle, and there he was well liked. None of the courtsmen or ladies of the court knew anything of what they would do with him or what kind of use they could make of him. But they did like him, and they allowed him to stay and hang around. Until at last, it happened to be the king's head cook, who took pity upon the boy and allowed him to come and work within the kitchen. And there his task was to feed the kitchen fires, stir the embers, clean the ashes, sweep the floors, wash the dishes. And he entered into this time of service, the work of ashes. But then it happened one day that nobody else was available to take the meal to the king. And as the boy brought the afternoon meal to the king, he entered into the presence of the king without taking off his tarboosh that he was wearing. For he had decided immediately upon entering the forest that he would not show his golden hair to anyone, for he simply was not ready to do so. And even in the presence of the king, he would not take off his tarboosh. And when the king told him that it was not proper to do such a thing, and asked him to remove it, the boy replied, I cannot. I have a very sore place upon the top of my head, and it would be more offensive than not removing the tarboosh. The king was not amused, and he went to the cook and scolded the cook for hiring such a boy and ordered him to put the boy out of the castle. Well, again, the cook did take pity upon the boy, for he was well liked, and he was a very hard worker. And so he exchanged the boy for the gardener's boy. And our king's son became the gardener's boy. And there he planted plants, tended flowers, he raked and dug, worked the soil, endured the weather, the scalding sun, the pelting rain, the wind and the dust, and he became a boy of the elements. Well, upon one very hot, sunny day, he was working in the garden, weeding alongside of the gorgeous flowers that grew there. And he was so hot, and he knew that nobody was around, he dared to take off his tarboosh. Well, the sun glinted off and shone so brightly, reflecting upon that golden hair, that it sent shimmers of light high up into the castle towers where the princess's room was. And as she was there and saw the glittering light upon her wall, she went immediately to the window to see from whence it came. And there she saw the boy weeding away with his golden hair. And she called to him, "Gardener's boy, will you bring me some flowers?" Well, the gardener's boy immediately put his tarboosh back on, and he went about gathering up the nicest wild flowers that he could find. And as he was on his way to bring them to the princess, he was stopped by the gardener and was told to get rid of those weeds and to go and get some of the finest flowers that they had growing. But the boy refused, saying, "These have a stronger fragrance, and she will like them better." And so he brought her the wildflowers. And when he knocked and was allowed to enter the chamber and delivered the flowers, she was quick, and she pulled the tarboosh from his head and revealed his golden hair. He scrambled, covering his head with his hands, yanking the tarboosh back and putting it back on. But she had seen what she had seen, and she gave to him 2 golden coins for his trouble of bringing the flowers. Well, the boy had no use for the coins, and he gave them to the gardener's kids as toys to play with. And so it was, upon the next day, the princess asked for him again to bring her flowers. This time the boy was ready, and she was unable to get the tarboosh from his head. And again she gave him a couple of coins, of which he delivered again to the gardener's kids. And this dance went on between the two of them for quite some time. Some days she would be able to remove the tarboosh, and others he would succeed in keeping her from doing so. And then one day, the kingdom, well, there was a call to war, for an invading force of an army was coming. And the king did not know if his army was indeed going to be strong enough in order to defeat the one that came.
Wow. Thank you for that. This part, I think this is the part that resonates the most for me every time. The golden hair, kind of being a misfit in the castle society, and nobody knowing what to do with him. Because this is the point after he makes contact with the wild man and then has to kind of integrate or reintegrate into his society. And it ended on a cliffhanger.
I I very much enjoy this section of the story as well. I think there's a lot that's packed into this middle part of the story that definitely can speak a lot to us on a lot of topics.
Well, if anybody is watching and you want to come on the call and join us to feed the story and talk about your reaction, what came up for you, your thoughts, I'm going to put the email again in the chat room. Just shoot me an email and I'll send you a link to hop on. Or you can just comment in the comments if you'd rather do it that way. And meantime, I'll let Art keep going.
So while we're waiting for people to join us, as the storyteller, I never really like to share my own thoughts to open things up because I don't want to influence what is coming up for people. But I will take the moment to talk a little bit more about the idea of feeding the story and what that really means. I actually had a wonderful conversation with a friend of mine last night about feeding the story. And one of the things that really arose from that, I really loved as an observation that he was talking about, was that when we truly are feeding the story, we're feeding what is coming up for us, what's impacting us in our hearts, in our feelings. It's not about what's coming down out of the head. And there's a real distinction there. When I listen to a story and I feel truly impacted by something, it's in the chest that it hits me. It's not an intellectual exercise or a gymnastic of the mind. It's something that's felt in the heart and in the body. And that's a true sharing and a true feeding of the story. And what I feed is my experience with the story. Too often it's very easy, especially from where I sit in the chair of the storyteller, where because I told the story, I know the story, I've studied the story, what I say might be considered the symbolism of the story, but there is no such thing. It's the individual experience that each person has when they listen to it. And whether it's something directly related to a symbol in the story, or whether it made me think of the lunch I ate yesterday. That's my experience of what the story brought up for me. And looking at what it is that's coming up and sharing that can lead each of us on a very powerful individual journey. And so there are no wrong answers and there are no right answers when we're feeding the story. And I think that's very important to keep in mind.
We have Paul that just requested to join, so I sent him out the link. Um, as far as what you said about the feeling and the experience versus the thoughts or what's in your head, I kind of do both, and I can't always separate the one from the other. It's whatever comes up could be a thought, a feeling, whatever. Plus, I'm so out of touch with my feelings anyway from all the dissociation. Often, what comes up are thoughts, but I'll tie it to particular situations happening in my life, or the culture, or whatever. I tend to be. I can get more intellectual and analytical about it. So I'm trying to keep in mind what you said about what hit me on an emotional level to the extent that I can even sense it, or on an experiential level. And surely, like two of the biggest parts, especially today when you were telling it, it was he's back in the court society, how they liked him, like he was a cool guy, but nobody knew what to do with him. They didn't have a place to fit him in. That definitely resonated because that's been a theme running throughout my life on an emotional level for probably my whole life. And then in previous versions of the story, not so much tonight, but it was the golden hair part because I've always had the golden hair as a child too. I was a gifted kid, the only one at my school. From a very early age, I was like this kid that had all these special gifts and abilities. I learned really quickly. I was reading in kindergarten, and so people were always taking me aside and treating me different from the other people around me because of some kind of specialness that I supposedly had. So I kind of grew up with that knowledge that I had this strand of golden hair, and people were going to react to it in ways that I might not always understand, and I needed environments that did understand it so that I could develop it and that kind of stuff. So that part of the story rings very true with me. And then to go from that to the core, I think it's kind of tied together, even though the story doesn't make it explicit. He's had contact with the wild man, which a lot of people, maybe most in the castle, may not necessarily have had. He has the golden hair, which is going to set him apart as well. Here's Paul. And so you take all of that and you try to integrate him into this ordinary castle society where they've just had this limited range of experiences from birth. You're going to get what you get in the story. And so I think that's the part that hit me the most emotionally was him not only him trying to find his place, but the other people around him trying to find his place for him as well. Because if they can find the place for him, that that helps their like that helps them as well. It creates the harmony in the society that the society is designed to maintain. And then I did another part that hit me a little bit, and I didn't really want to make too much of it, but hey, Paul, welcome. I found it like it's the princess, it's the woman, the female doing the violating, like ripping off the tarbouche and um, non-consensually. And usually it's males are portrayed as the one that violate the females, but in this story, it was the minute that happened, my reaction was, who does she think she is? Don't rip off my tarbouche. And that's she crossed a line there. Like she took liberties that I don't think anyone's entitled to take with another person, and it was the female taking them with the male in this story. So that's my initial little, I guess, emotional impressions. They're not full fledged emotions, but they're my less intellectual impressions. And how's it going, Paul?
It's going all right over here on this lovely Saturday morning in Beijing that I woke up 20 minutes ago to.
Oh, well,
Yeah, but I got in plenty good of Arthur's reading of the story. And I always love little nuances that Arthur throws to the story, like the boy's wearing a tarbouche, and I'm like, it's a playful word, and like the versions are always he's just wearing a cap. So like to give him a tarbouche makes it almost regional, makes it almost geographical. Because I don't know where is a tarbouche really usually worn. I'm just curious. I don't know, like Middle Eastern or something like that. But that's interesting because I've heard Arthur tell the story. Morocco.
It's Moroccan fez.
Yeah. So then that gives us a geographical marker for where the story is taking place. If you were wearing whatever other.
Uh-oh. Oh, we didn't lose you. Well, he'll either come back or he'll drop off and come back in.
Yeah. But yeah, the fun I have with stories is I like to listen to a lot of different versions of them. And then whatever pieces happen to come up each time I tell it, it's not always going to be the same from one telling to the next. And that's something that I really enjoy about being a storyteller, is that it's not about memorization. It's about allowing the story to flow. And so I really do enjoy that.
Well, you did a good job.
No, thank you.
Today had a very nice flow.
For me, one of the aspects of that particular interaction that you cited, the interaction between the boy and the princess I find for myself a lot of different metaphors and symbology for just courtship and relationship, whether it's between, man and woman, man and man, woman and woman, whatever it might be. There's a dance in the courtship, and the golden hair in this part, for me, has essentially replaced the golden ball. When he's a boy playing with the golden ball before he goes off with Iron John, the wild man, he's now going off to be mentored, to go through an initiation. And even though Iron John is telling him he hasn't passed the trial, the boy's experience with the trial is still unique to his experience. And his time in front of the spring, when he's gazing deep into his own eyes and he's wanting to get more and more in touch with his inner self, and it's in that moment that the hair is dipping and it's turned to gold, he's realizing that golden purpose, that the golden ball we play with as a kid, our favorite childhood toy. In my hero's journey work, I do a visualization where I get us in touch with that favorite toy we played with as a kid, because there's going to be a lot of messages guiding us towards our purpose and how we played as children. And then as we go through the initiation point of the process, the sitting in front of the spring, the realization and the transformation from just playing with our purpose to now our purpose becoming a part of us. And the boy is choosing, he has an outward showing of it that others can see, that he's choosing to hide it. For whatever reason, he's choosing to do that. And for me, I see a lot of people, and myself included in this, hiding their purpose from the world because it's safer. And so the princess, in wanting to see the golden hair, she's seeing the boy's potential. She's seeing the golden purpose of this person she's becoming attracted to and getting to know, and she's wanting to see more of that purpose. And so she's poking at it. She's ripping off the hat. It becomes this playful dance between the two of them of, I want to see more of your purpose, but he's not wanting to show it. He's keeping it very close to his heart. And so that's what's always come up for me when I listen to that part of the story, is that dance of courtship and how it relates to when I connect with my soulmate and my true partner. That strength of power of being connected to wanting to see each other succeed in our dreams and in our purpose, for us, is very central to our relationship and a very powerful part of that. And on the flip side of that, I see a lot of relationships fail because one side or another may sacrifice their golden purpose in lieu of another for whatever reason, whether it's intentional or not, conscious or not. It will often happen where the balance in a relationship, one is on purpose, one is not. And that imbalance can lead to a lot of just issues as the relationship ages. And so that's also things that I'm looking at in symbolisms of stories of the relationship, of how do we truly support the people we love, whether it's a significant other, a spouse, a child, a friend. How do we truly support each other on our purpose? And that dance of courtship to me just brings a lot of cool, playful energy to the feel of it for me. And I realize for others it's going to speak very differently, but that's what I love about stories. We can sit in a room and all of us hear the exact same words I spoke, yet each of our experiences is completely individualized from where we've come up through life and where we've been. And so That's why I love these conversations. But I'd love to return to Paul and hear where Paul was going.
Hey, that means I've made it back in the room.
Yes, you
Yeah,
did.
you were
All
we were talking
right.
about the fez, the tarbouche.
Yeah, yeah, and like what that brings up for me is then, I mean, one, it's a term I didn't have familiarity with, so then I have the option to go look it up while the story's taking place, or let's say I'm in a venue where I don't have that access. I don't want to be looking at my phone disrespecting the storyteller. So those elements can sometimes give good nuance, but then like if I do know what a tarbouche is, I'm like, all right, he's a Moroccan boy. And then I'm like, okay, this is a Moroccan boy. It's a Moroccan story. And then my mind starts to go to those places sometimes. Like that was what was coming up for me when and just for me, this is all what's just coming up for me. It's a playful word. It's tarbouche, tarbouche. Like it's one of those words. And I'm funny where I like to play with words, how they feel in your mouth when you say them. I mean, there's a word in Spanish, peluqueria, and I learned Spanish in high school, and I lived in Miami for most of my life, but can't speak fluent Spanish at all. But peluqueria is a salon, a hair salon,
Oh,
and mariposa is butterfly.
butterfly.
Yeah, there you go, Jeff. And like those words, just what I'm saying them for is because the way they feel in the mouth, tarbouche, peluqueria. Like again, that's I hear the word tarbouche, and that's what comes up for me. I just start thinking how it sounds in my mouth. And dare I say there what I'm getting at is that like, there's a distracting element that can happen for a listener like me, because then that's where I'm going. That's what's coming up for me. And whether it's in here or in here, it's debatable because it's really all connected if it's ideal. Um, but yeah, enough about the tarbouche. Jeff, I love what came up for you and how you attempted not to intellectualize, and you felt that the princess was acting in a very disrespectful way towards the boy. Like that's a perspective that's awesome. Like it came up for you, and then Arthur's courtship between the two of them, the playfulness going on, and there's a lot of gold element like threaded in the story. How's my audio? My video's choppy, but my audio
No,
good.
you're fine. Your video's good on my end too.
All right, over here I don't know if it's my tablet acting weird these days. There's a lot of gold. I mean, there's the golden hair, the golden finger, the golden ball. Then she's giving him golden coins. But he just seems to be like, and I like what Arthur said, he's giving away these things. And the three of us and whoever's listening knows the story. There's more gold that comes in the third part. That once again, he's just giving away, which is metaphorically coming up for me. It's like, and it's interesting because just last night I saw the clip. It was a YouTube short of Heath Ledger's Joker, and he's talking to the bad guys, and he's like, "Kill the Batman," and they all start laughing. He's like, "Oh yeah, if you could do it, why haven't you done it already?" And then his answer is, "If you're good at something, never do it for free." And it's a beautiful line. I mean, we know Joker's psychotic mind that's going on there. I know the character's psychotic mind. So it's not like I'm going to take that and make it a T-shirt or anything like that, that token line. However, how does that relate to this is his purpose? This gold symbolizes purpose. And here he is just kind of, one way I felt to look at it is, okay, he has no need for money. However, he's just saying, here, they're playthings. Have your children play with them. So, and maybe what came up here just now is when he was a child, he played with a golden ball. Now he's like, here's some gold pieces. Here, children, play with these. So, that's curious. And maybe he's still at a stage where the gold metaphor isn't symbolic of his purpose for him. Not yet. He's hiding it under his hat, his tarbouche, and he's reluctant to have anyone see it. So, and Arthur, you were saying that, and that's just hiding purpose. And then what Arthur, what you said, which came up very, very impactfully, sacrifice. when you're sacrificing for your partner? Um, when do you get to the point where you're not only sacrificing a little, but you're sacrificing a lot? In other words, your entire purpose is gone because of the sacrifice to the other, whether it was significant partner or even child, offspring, because that destroys something in each of us. I feel it kills off something really to be out of touch with purpose, and to sort of just stuff it down and hide it, and convince oneself, oh, it's because I care for that person, because I love that person. That's why I'm doing this sacrificing. It's a lie, because no sacrifice is worth all that to lose purpose. Yeah, so it's just coming from me. It's that last part with. So the question, yeah, you're great. You're great to say that, Arthur. How to provide support and remain true. How to provide support through sacrifice and remain true to purpose. It's a juggling act, I would say.
Mm-hmm. I also associate with the gold with the king energy, especially the golden hair, the coins, the not needing the gold. Like when you have the abundance of king energy, you can afford to give it away or let it fall on whoever needs it. And then the like hiding your purpose. We talked earlier about community not always supporting the hero's journey, or the hero's journey not having the community that can sustain it. In the autism community, we know that as masking, and in the gay community, we know that as being in the closet. And so if there's it's usually to protect from hostility. So if there's a hostility to your purpose or to your king energy, that tendency to mask is going to show itself. And I think it's kind of it's in a way it's to protect the purpose or from the hostility until you can find a place where it's okay to let the mask drop and the purpose to emerge, which is what I think these groups that we're doing. That's why I think they're so valuable.
I love what you said there, and it calls to mind the conversation from last week of the balance of the king energy, of the sovereign side and the wild man side. The protector energy, that sovereign, protect the kingdom, protect the realm, cage the wild man, put the purpose away because we have to be a certain way for the kingdom. But in order to persevere through, that same protector king, if he hides in his castle walls all the time and doesn't have that primal something inside that allows him to become victorious and bring out the warrior when it's time to go to war, to find purpose, to claim purpose, to face all those negative influences of, you can't, and your purpose is under attack, and those elements. That's where that wild man energy, I feel, is very necessary. We have to be able to reach into that primal place and pull that out of it, to scream and yell and beat our chest, the proverbial caveman. Yes, I love it. It can be very powerful and releasing. I mean, to actually do it, and society looks at you funny, but you know what? Screw it.
Yeah, I do screw it.
That's primal energy. Tap into it. Do it. There's nothing wrong with that. If you need it, if you need to reach into that, to grab that, to tap that, bring that out, allow that to be there. Don't cage that in.
I agree, 100%, and that's what I try to help other people to do and get to the point where they can do. But there can be social consequences. Like, yes, tap into your primal energy, but you may get ostracized or isolated or alienated because of it, which is to me is just a sign that that's not the community for you. That's not the community that's going to support you on your mission or your path. It's kind of a signal to continue to search for the like your tribe that will.
What's coming up is be true to oneself. And I don't know if it's possible to be true to oneself, and no matter what the audience is, no matter what the group is, and even go a step further and be like, the reason why this audience is acting this way in this hostile, exiling, cancel culture way has something to do more with them than with me. I'm just a catalyst. My presence is just a catalyst for them to act that way. Versus, why are they so fucked up? Why are they treating me this way? And there's two sides to that coin. There's the compassionate side, and then there's the judgmental side. And then to feel, because this is age old for me. It's a matter of, you have a vice, you have an addiction, if you will. You're a functioning addict. Say you're a drinker, okay, and you have drinking buddies, drinking crew. Because the drinking crew could include drinking ladies as well as drinking buddies. We know this. And you say to the crew, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to quit this drinking thing. Cold turkey. I don't want to drink anymore. It's not serving me. I watched a YouTube video that just told me how drinking's not doing me any good. And the whole crew, most of the whole crew, the outspoken ones, silent ones will think it, the outspoken ones will say it. Ah, come on, that's bullshit. Because all of a sudden, their identity is threatened by your desire to change. They won't be who they are anymore because they won't have Paul, their drinking buddy, to include. So they don't want to see change. And that change is very likely to move me towards my purpose, because I'm no longer inebriated and no longer drowning my purpose in alcohol, or the connection to my purpose in alcohol. But yeah, there's going to need to be, Arthur's lovely word, I enjoy it, catabasis. Struggle that's going to come up as a result of breaking away from that crew of drinkers. And then go find a new tribe even, which can be frightening and lonely. Yeah. So that's come up to me with all the talk. And Jeff, I like that perspective that the gold is the king energy, and within him he has an abundance. So he's just capable of saying, okay, here, just pass it on, send it away, But it's also demonstrating his pure of heart, which Arthur spoke to in this part of the story when Iron John said it, go out, learn about life for yourself. You can't be here in these safe confines anymore. It's your time. And he says, I see that you're pure of heart, or something like that, you said, Arthur. So that's the first time in the story we're hearing that about the boy. He's pure of heart. And I guess really defying his parents, defying the rule of the kingdom, and releasing the wild man from the cage was a pure of heart gesture. Because it really changed the course of his life, but he made that choice anyway. That's pure of heart gesture, just the same. So another example of the boy being pure of heart, and maybe even bringing the princess wildflowers that smell more fragrant. Another gesture of being pure of heart. He wants to bring her what is the most pleasing, not the most aesthetic or attractive to the eye. So that's another beautiful thing.
Yeah, and he defied the gardener's orders in order to do that. Like he went with not with what authority was telling him was the best, but what he identified as the best. And I'm also thinking about the trial at the spring, and Art, you mentioned that something like he failed the wild man's trials or whatever, but then when you described it, it didn't sound like failure to me. He looked inside himself, he found his purpose, he saw his golden hair, he accomplished everything he needed to do to set him on his mission. So was the wild man's trial the appropriate one for him in the first place? Is it a reflection on the wisdom of the wild man that he set up a trial that was not actually the one the boy needed, or was that intentional on the wild man's part to set up a trial? It's kind of a commentary on mentors and mentorship energy. Like the boy got the mentorship he needed, but he didn't get it in the way the mentor was trying to deliver it, if that was the wild man's intention. And also, as Paul was talking, there's a difference between being true to yourself, which I think is noble, and being selfish. And how you tell that difference, I'm not sure, because I think a lot of times it can feel the same or look the same, or when you're trying to decide, like, do I stay true to myself here? It seems really selfish to do that when you measure it against the effect it may have on the group or the community. So I think there's a path to walk between integrity, like personal integrity, self integrity, and selfishness.
One of the questions you raised there, it made me think of actually a piece I brought in one of my groups last night on suffering or challenges and the transformative power that they face. Now, in a lot of other stories, there can be some very dramatic challenges that is very obvious suffering. And so in this particular story, it's not as obvious, but it is there when we really look at it. It's symbolized by the prick of the finger. His finger is hurting. There's some pain that's plaguing him that causes him to dip his finger. And the second day causes him to run his fingers through his hair, and the hair falls. It's the pain in his finger. So that's symbolic of suffering that we will encounter on our journey. And trial is really another word for challenge. And I think this story does a good job of, where the wild man is saying, you failed the trial, you failed the challenge. And so you can't stay here in this spot anymore. Now it's time for you to go on to out into the world. So the next step, the next stage. But in the failing, I hate the word failure because of our modern day definition of it and the way we look at it as something that's terrible. But in facing the challenge of sitting in front of the spring, even though he did not necessarily accomplish the goal that was set for the challenge, the simple act of doing that challenge, of wrestling with the suffering, the pain of his finger, the ultimate result of that was a transformation, a big one. His hair was turned to gold, and the transformation was so impactful on the boy, he feels the need to hide that transformation when he goes back out into the world. And so that time at the trial of the spring, for me, really speaks to that portion of the hero's journey that usually happens in wilderness wanderings, during times of service, or when your whole world collapses around you. These times are when our suffering and our challenges become a transformative power that without it, we wouldn't succeed later on in the future. What is it in part two that is drawing the princess to the boy? It's his golden hair. He takes his tarbouche off. The sunlight hits his hair. It glints up into her room. She never would have looked twice at a gardener's boy before the fact he had his tarbouche off and the sunlight reflected off his golden hair. So the trial was, even though in its box there was failure, he still got what he needed from the experience to allow him to succeed later on his next steps down the journey. And that's why I feel failure is just our modern day definition and how our society looks at failure and the connotation it puts to it. It's just completely incorrect. Failure is not an end. It's not, oh, I did something wrong. Failure is just, okay, so I wanted X outcome and I ended up with Z outcome. Well, now I have different choices to make. But failure in our present culture is an end. It's I can't do this anymore. It's over. I give up. It starts to now attack my self-esteem and erode away at me. I have failed. I can't accomplish anything. I can't do anything. And it knocks me off my path. And so I really love that symbolism within the trial of the spring is what I really feel it's speaking to.
Yeah, which leaves me wondering who the real mentor is, or where the real mentorship energy is, because it's not the wild man's trial as originally intended that led to that. It's the boy himself and the experiences he had and his reactions to those experiences that led to that. So the wild man is set up as the mentor figure, but the results the boy got didn't actually come from the wild man's attempt to mentor.
Well, in the way that I see mentorship, and the way that I see the hero's journey in and of itself, I believe the wild man knows exactly what he's doing. In that he knows the boy isn't going to pass the trial. It's not about passing the trial. It's about going through the trial and what happens in the process. What transformation of the boy is going to come. If the trial was truly about don't let anything fall into the spring, well, he's done after day one. He let something fall into the spring. He failed. It's done. It's over. There's the illusion of the second chance of, okay, we'll let it go. Try again. He's released from the trial when his entire head turns gold. That is a huge transformation. So the symbology there for me is the transformation was accomplished. The wild man put him in front of the spring to be transformed. And even though the boy was dabbling in it, I actually think the boy would have failed the trial had he actually accomplished the trial and not let anything fall into the spring, because then there's no motion, there's no energy, nothing's happening, there's no transformation. And so the mentorship of what the wild man is doing there is placing a challenge in front of the boy's path so that the boy becomes transformed. And that's what comes up and resonates for me within the story.
So why lie about it? Like, it bothers me for two reasons. The deception on the part of the wild man. Oh, hang on, I lost the other one. And that the wild man energy I associate with like raw and primal, and it seems a little cunning and sophisticated for something that's supposed to be kind of wild and spontaneous. So it kind of contrasts with the whole concept of wild man energy to pull that to be that calculated in your how you set up the mentor challenge.
And in this particular instance, that's how the story is presenting it. There's other more kind of straightforward mentorship energies that happen in other stories. Sometimes it can be as simple as having aid from nature and animals, such as in a story called The Spyglass, is a great one, where a hunter meets 4 animals and gets 4 gifts that allow him to succeed along the way. In this case, what I love about the Iron John story is that it's being more subtle. There is more trickery within it. And the messaging in it of the boy doesn't get to be given the key by his mother. The boy has to steal the key. Our challenges we face aren't always going to be straight up. When I first decided to be, I decided to step onto my path and to start telling stories. I just decided I'm going to start telling stories, and I'm going to start finding a place where I can tell stories. And that was my first step. So I'm just going to go sit in front of a spring and see what happens. Well, in my sitting in front of the spring and deciding to tell stories, I ended up being led on a path that led me to writing sensei pieces for groups that turned into turning those sensei pieces into the book, which created the idea of I'm not just telling stories and I'm not just writing a book about it. I can actually use this material to coach people and help people, and have created the support groups around it for leading people through the book and leading people through the material. I had no premeditated idea of any of that when I first said, I'm going to step out on my journey. And so what I believe Iron John is really truly doing by sitting the boy down on the spring, what he's really saying is, here is the beginning of your path. Start your path. And he gives him a task that starts his path. What that ends up evolving into, with him dipping his finger and the hair falling and his hair turning gold, once the wild man has realized that, okay, the boy has now been transformed. He's now gone through his first trial and been transformed. And in a lot of rites of initiation, elders would bring boys out into the wilderness, and a lot of these rites of initiation were looked on as very archaic because there'd be a wounding involved. The boys didn't necessarily come back victorious or succeeding in a challenge. They came back experiencing a challenge and walking away with a wound and a reminder of something. Was a lot of these types of primitive culture kinds of initiations. And so there's a message in that things aren't always what they seem, and there's a teaching and a lesson within that. I feel that's what comes up for me.
I want to use the love fest line, but I feel it's a little bit too insensitive. Arthur, you get the reference. Because you and Jeff been going back and forth for so long, I just haven't said anything.
No, jump in. This is
no, it's
sometimes
it's
you have to just grab the
Arthur
mic.
And I went, no. I was loving the dialogue. I truly was. I was taking notes. You may have noticed me. It's an inside joke, and it's making light of a man's suffering. I truly know that I'm doing that. However, I just felt just wanting to be cheeky. Yeah, I've loved all of it. And Jeff, I have to, if I may, provide some feedback. If you're open,
go ahead.
I don't want to just
go ahead.
blur it out. Well, you're familiar with archetypes, the 12 archetypes?
I know the 4 and 12 is Carol.
Carol Pearson, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not so much familiar with those exact 12, but I do know the 4 in the shadow.
I'm familiar with them, and the OPP program that Arthur's familiar with. He explained more if you're interested. It's a great program. It even features them in there too.
Yeah, I remember it from Omega. I did the.
Yeah, you did Omega. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I did some Omega of Omega.
As well. which I was happy to see the crossover because I'd already known about Pearson when I met it in the OPP. I had a I forgot how they described I had a therapist that was big into these kind of modalities, and she introduced me to them. And I'm familiar with, I've done a survey that reveals to you the stronger, and I did one for Arthur actually. It reveals your stronger archetype.
Don't break up now.
Am I No, please.
Yeah, you broke up a little bit, right? Okay.
But reveals your 12.
Yeah, I think you're back.
Strongest of the 12 is what you wrote on.
And the survey will reveal to you where you are in the collection of the 12, and which have higher ratings and so forth. Doesn't mean it's always it's great, because within that archetype there could be a lower level of maturity. It could also be shadow energy. Like if your king is high, but you're a tyrannical king, you're in shadow energy, which means you're going out into life every day as a tyrannical king with tyrannical king energy. And why I'm going into all of this is because the orphan is one of the archetypes, and the orphan has friction with authority, in a sense that like it's us less fortunate against the powers that be. There's that kind of thing going on within the orphan energy. And so a couple times, like, and again, I don't mean any judgment by this. I want to share it because it will come up for me hearing. Like there's a part where the princess is I don't remember which word specifically you used, but she's sort of violating the boy. You didn't use that word, but she's
ripped his thing off, grabbed his head off.
She was
if
aggressive
anybody
with him,
did that to me.
Right, exactly. And she's in a position of authority, really. She's the princess's daughter. She's the king's daughter. She's the princess. And then you'd refer to the deception of the wild man, like he deceived the boy. Like this terminology, to me, it's that orphan energy that says, fucking authority figures, you know, kind of thing. Always doing shit that puts me at a disadvantage, if you will. And that's just what came up when I heard it's just words, because I'm very sensitive and keen to words. And I only want to offer it as a reflection and feedback of what I've heard, not to judge you, because I love a lot of the
things no, I don't feel I am anti-authoritarian. I'm proudly anti-authoritarian.
Right, but I picked up on that.
Maybe not for the reasons you state, because the wild man, it was the deceptive element in the authority, not the authority itself. I can respect legitimate authority that has a purpose for my life. It was the princess' abuse of her authority, and it was the gardener's setting his authority above what the boy knew to be his true purpose, was to bring her the most fragrant flowers. So he was trying to substitute authority for expertise, for the expertise that the boy himself had. So I guess it's like misapplied authority, or the distortions that come around authority, more than authority itself.
I hear you. And I have a very similar thing. Believe me, I've had countless encounters and clashes with those who claim themselves to be in authority roles. Yeah. You know, I'm very much about, I don't give a fuck what role you're in. If I have to say something, I'm going to say it. I'll do my best to be eloquent, but believe me, you're probably going to be rubbed the wrong way, regardless of how nicely I say it, because I shouldn't have said it to begin with, in their opinion. But nonetheless, I'm aware of my orphan energy. You know, certainly that it's in that state, and so those who just came up with me when listening, and then Arthur's coming back to it and being like, well, the trials weren't so much a deception, and this is fairy tale, so it's really finding how this fairy tale can be life lesson related, or how it can be beneficial. And I've not read into Robert Bly's, because he wrote a book, right? And there's in the book he goes into the story more, I believe. I've not read the book yet. One, I love that Arthur, you know, the word failure, and we spoke yesterday about how words have been polluted, or another word used, perverted, yeah. And even the word suffering has taken on a perverted sense about it, or failure. And so I was just talking to an 18-year-old yesterday, what's what I'm looking for, synchronistically, because we met in the middle of fucking nowhere to get a bus And that bus took us to the exact same bus stop, and she lives in the compound next door to me. And the bus was about 40 minutes away from here. So I love these little synchronistic exchanges. So this little 18-year-old Chinese girl who had fairly good mastery of Chinese, even though they're very humble people. Oh, my English is not so good. She hung for 40 minutes with big brain over here, you know, and she did well. And I taught her the word nostalgia. We looked it up on my translator. So we had a great exchange. But failure came up. Conversation came up. And because at 3 years old, her mom decided it was time for you to learn English. And I said, your mom was a little overzealous, because they say that that's maybe a little bit too early to start introducing that. But I have encounters where I've done that. I've worked with 3-year-old children to get them to appreciate how great and fun English can be, not how much of a chore it can be. Needless to say, we talked about failure, and that was it. And parents are just looking to insulate their child against failure, because having English, especially in this country or in the globally, is a leg up. And that's all the parent was going for, was like, I just want you to have the best so that you don't fail. And then what comes to mind is the book Siddhartha, or the latter part of the book. Vasudeva is saying to Siddhartha, do you think that your follies were specifically to prevent your offspring from having follies? You know, your fucking up is a way to prevent your child from fucking up. He says you could die 1,000 times and you would never change your child's fate. So let go of that foolishness. And that's what I was telling the girl. I said, your parents could do all the fuck they want. You're going to fail anyway. And then, to use the word failure, Arthur, I said, but what's failure other than just a mistake that you learned from? Just a mistake. And so here's the boy with this task that the wild man gave him, maybe already knowing that he was not going to succeed. He was going to fail, but he was going to learn. And he trusted that the boy was going to learn. And that's why he gave him these tasks that may have been out of reach for him a little bit. But he knew the boy was going to learn, because he knew the boy's heart. And so therefore, and what is a little bit jarring is like, he's like, hey, you failed, get the fuck out. I mean, I'm using my terms, of course, you know, he didn't say it that way, of course, you know, but what he said is beautiful. He says, go learn about poverty. I've now seen 2 versions. I have a version up on my screen here from a different site than last week. And both times, and even Arthur's story, he says, go learn about poverty, which is, this boy has lived in a castle as the son of a king up until this point in his life. And now the wild man's saying, go out and learn about the hardships of life. And he does. You know, he doesn't lick his wounds and crawl to a corner and say, the wild man betrayed me. The wild man made me fail. You know, he doesn't go to that place. He just, all right, here we go. I'm off. And something about him made him charming to the court, not to the king. The king was like, get this guy out of here with his sword in his head. The fuck, him and his tarbouche, you know. But even then, the cook was like, nah, I'm not going to listen to my king. I'm just going to send him over to the gardener, and we're going to do a little bit of a swap. And the king won't notice, you know, because he doesn't pay attention to that shit. Just notice the tarbouche is gone. But you see, people still looked out for him. There was something about him. And that, Jeff, you were speaking to, where not always do we see those opportunities being laid out before us. People who are looking out, who will look out for us. And funny enough, Arthur, I just sent you the YouTube video with Steve Jobs. And if you had a chance, it's short, like a minute and a half. And he's talking about how if you just ask, if you're willing to just ask, people are more likely to do for you than you believe. He talks about the story at 12 years old. He calls, is it Bill Packard, or one of the guys who started Hewlett Packard? He's called maybe Hewlett. Called one of the two. He called him on the phone. He said he lived in Cupertino, California as well. Called him up. His number was in the telephone book. He called him. He says, listen, I'm a 12-year-old boy. My name's Steve Jobs. I need some spare parts for a frequency counter that I'm building. I mean, he's calling up the guy who created Hewlett Packard, 12 years old boy. And not only did the guy give him the parts he needed, gave him a job assembling frequency counters on the assembly line, a summer job at the Hewlett Packard factory. He took a shine to the boy, but simply because the boy was like, hey, any chance you could give me a hand here? Any chance you could help me out a little bit? So he was just willing to ask, and that speaks back to what Arthur and I were encountering yesterday. Be willing to ask. So much in just the asking, which I think sometimes we don't do, because I know I get to times where I feel like if the answer is no, I don't want to hear it.
I've always had a problem. I've always had a problem asking for help. That's something that I am more aware of now in my later years that I was never aware of when I was younger. And I'll be the first to admit I am piss poor at asking for help. And it's something that I'm challenging myself to do more of. It can be very hard. So that resonates with me a lot.
And the boy he's got nothing. He's sent out by the wild man. Go see what the world is like. And the boy does ask. He actually comes back to Iron John. He says, hey, I need an army to kick the shit out of the other army. Can you help me out with that? And that's what I've learned in the story through reading a little bit of backstory about what's going on for Iron John. What's the significance of his character and his journey, if you will, and what he needs to do for himself so as to be able to release the enchantment that's placed upon him. Which comes to mind, Beauty and the Beast. That's what came to me this past week, Beauty and the Beast, where the prince had an enchantment placed upon him, turned him into the beast, into the wild man. And I'll leave
all
it
those
with that.
enchantments.
Yeah, well, they're beautiful.
There's a lot of those going around.
Yeah, we've got a couple, I'm sure, if we really sit down and think about it. Some enchantments on us. Actually, It just came up basically, and I'm comfortable speaking because I already spoken about the orphan archetype. My mother's leaving at 14 or 13, 14, left an indelible impression. One would say childhood trauma. But really, if I want to spin it, it's an enchantment. It really was. That abandonment impression was like an enchantment of me. And whether or not it's still enchanting me is curious for me to contemplate.
I like that. Did you get it lifted, or are you still under the enchantment?
Well, I have a twin sister, and of course we encountered the same circumstances. Mother left, and my sister, I know for sure, still harangues my mom a lot because of the abandonment. I myself, for the most part, have got peace with it. And so in getting peace, that's the lifting of the enchantment. And the lifting of the enchantment, the act that I had to commit to lift the enchantment was to love her despite the actions that she chose, which were the only actions she had available to her. However fucked up they were, however fucked up the circumstances became after she left, they were the only options that she had, or she thought she had at that moment. So that was the lifting of the enchantment, was to love her completely as she is, the flawed individual, the broken individual, the wounded individual that she is. And I feel I've done that in a lot of
And it
respects.
worked?
Oh, yeah, most certainly. I don't mind sharing, and I share it. It may sound like I'm sharing it in a stoic way, but she had the other day what is called a widow's maker's heart attack. So apparently it's one that comes upon you, you're not even aware, and more times than not, it takes the person's life. And lost my dad to a heart attack at 51. He was 51, not me. And so, it didn't knock me off my center to hear this news. I know her lifestyle, and something big, profound for me is I've come to know her as Phyllis, a woman who's 76 years old, whose life circumstances are what they are, whose childhood is what it is. I've learned about her. So when this happens, it's happening to Phyllis, the woman, not my dear mom, who then I've got to go buy a plane ticket, fly home to America just to be by her bedside blah, 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 blah. I say blah, 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 because that becomes identity, that becomes story. And I'm getting a little bit diverting away from the topic. But what I mean to say is, I love her for her journey, for her life story, not as Paul's mother. So in doing that, I feel, yeah, that lifted a lot of the enchantment, because she's not the mother that left me. She's the Phyllis whose life circumstances up until that point and life circumstances long after that point have just been her life. And I've just been one person in that life.
So it's how you're telling the story to yourself, which is what art talks about.
Reimagining of the story, if you will, or
yeah,
and it's healing, because no longer is the story, oh, my mom left me, she was a shitty mom, I had no mom, blah 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 blah. Like, as far as I could say, I had a family take me in, a girlfriend's family, and I always recall that story, that it was like a shell shock experience, because they were like your picture perfect nuclear family, and where I came from was far from that. So the year I spent living in their house was just more like shell shock.
I think, yeah, the most powerful stories are the ones we tell ourselves. That our life, like, they're the engine that run our lives, our emotional lives, even our actual lives. Did you freeze? You might have frozen. You froze at a perfect point.
Yeah, the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we allow others to tell us about ourselves are the two, in my opinion, the two biggest catalysts for what we allow in our experience to shape our own identities. And I love this metaphor that we're on of becoming enchanted by something and how to break an enchantment.
Yeah.
If I've been telling myself a certain story, I will never be able to succeed at being a storyteller. If I was to succumb to that kind of a rhetoric, I wouldn't be here. Telling myself, I'm just going to go find a place to tell stories and land where I land was a stepping stone. And that story's evolved as I've walked my path, because as I've walked, I've been intentionally looking for the story I want to craft around me and how I want to relate my challenges, my suffering, physical pain that comes along the way. What do I do with that? It's all framed within the story I tell myself and the story I allow others to tell me about myself. I've done that a lot. I've allowed a lot of stories to be told to me about me that I've had to decide weren't true and rewrite. And there's a breaking of an enchantment in that. I love that metaphor.
Yeah. Paul, you mentioned there was a survey of archetypes, or is that something do you have a website or something?
No, I've got your email. I'll send you something that I took the survey. It was like a scan of the paper that somebody scanned and then saved as a PDF. I turned it into an Excel spreadsheet.
Oh,
I got so jazzed about the story and the information. And do you have the Carol Pearson book? If not, you can get it free on PDF
No, I
Drive.
just have whatever's provided in the Omega program.
Yeah, pdfdrive.com. It's a website that oceans of PDF.
Lots of free PDFs are on that. And I came across the book. Paul shared it with me. And
okay.
Yeah, Carol S. Pearson is really great material for diving into the archetypes. And she wrote in there this point system survey where you score yourself on certain questions.
Oh, yeah, we did that in Omega. They had you rate where you are at each archetype level. But they didn't do anything with it afterwards. Oh,
No, they didn't. No, they. I remember the OPP. They had you decide where you were in the levels.
yeah.
And funny enough, the way they fashioned their levels was not the same as the way Pearson fashioned hers. They used, I think, level 0 or something, whereas she calls it shadow, which I thought was
Oh,
more poignant, to be in shadow energy of your archetype, because we know what shadow is in the Jungian sense. But Jeff, what I'll do, I'll send you the survey, the Excel spreadsheet. You fill it out, and then I even have
He can score it for you and send it back. He did that.
magician.
yeah. I'd love to take a look at it.
Just loves to create stuff, and yeah, I fashioned something pretty cool. And I myself, my therapist said you're not supposed to do it only every like 6 months or something like that. I did it once I finished designing it. I wanted to use it, so I did the survey again. It had only been 3 months since she initially introduced me to it, but I saw dramatic changes in the numbers just from that three month window. Like, these things are not fixed; they're not rigid. They will change. And then there's 4 quadrants too. So they group three archetypes into one quadrant. So then there's 3 archetypes in each of the quadrants, the dividing 4. It's pretty profound stuff.
What are
It's
the
nice.
are they like the Wilbur quadrants or some other system?
I'm not familiar with the Wilbur
Oh,
quadrants.
Ken Wilbur and the 4 quadrants.
And the name sounds familiar.
Well, anyway, I'm
Let
definitely
me.
interested in the
Yeah,
system.
I'll like I said, I'll get it over to you. I have your email here. I'll get you over to the spreadsheet. Plug in the numbers. Pay attention to the way they ask you to answer, because that what I felt was, and I even made a point of putting in red font so that it's clearly understood what you're being asked to do with each question in the survey.
Okay, I will try to follow its authority as closely as I can.
Yeah, man. Follow that fucking authority, bro. No, I'm just messing with you. Really, I only impart it to you as a way of saying you'll get the results that are more pure. So I feel that the reflection that the survey will give you will be most keen for you.
Okay. Well,
To
I
know
definitely
things.
I'd
Yeah,
love to play around with it.
yeah, man, absolutely. I'd love to join you on that journey for yourself. My pleasure.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you'll want to close with until next week?
Looking forward to next
No.
week.
Yeah. We
Me
squeezed the
too.
juice out of this bad boy today.
I think this
Nice.
was a very rich conversation. We've only scratched the surface too. My mind
Yeah.
was shooting off in some more directions than we had time to go down.
Mhm.
That's what's beautiful about it. It takes us to all kinds of places, and even after the show's done, the feelings and the mind keep running, and I
That's
love
what
that.
happened last week. Last week's conversation stayed with me all through the whole week. It's still in there.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then today, I think is going to add to that.
That's
Yeah.
why I
Well,
look forward to the
McConaughey.
conclusion.
No, me sure. McConaughey has this page. I've been covering it with this project I'm doing. Although I learned the page last November from his Green Lights book, and he says one way that you need to put yourself in the place of recognizing truth. He recalls a couple: is prayer, meditation, taking a walk, a road trip. But the one thing he says is being in good company. And I would truly regard this last. I wasn't here for the full hour and a half. I showed up 10 minutes late, but this full hour and a half of time has been spent in good company, and that has
Indeed.
brought us to being in the place of seeing truth, of being next to truth. So thank you so much, gentlemen.
Well, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I look forward to next week. And I want to say a shout out to the Machine Lies is in the comments. I know him from another group. He dropped in, so good to see you. Art, anything you want to close with?
Uh, Nothing in particular. It's been a great conversation. and I always love feeding the story. It is my favorite thing to do in life. And next week, I'll speak a little bit more about feeding the story, not just as a practice that follows a story, but how it can actually really transform the way that we communicate with each other one on one versus a term just coined last night. I'll explain versus coffee shopping for communication styles. So I'll bring that next week between the story and the actual feeding of the story while we're waiting for people to be able to sign on. Talk a little bit about feeding the story versus coffee shopping for interpersonal communication skills and authentic connections.
Okay. And we have a war coming up.
Yes. Yes, we
Yeah.
Well,
do.
tonight was a banquet for sure. So thank both of you.
Yeah.
And
Same
Paul,
to
is there
you.
anything you want to? Art, your website is HJ Roadmap.
HJ Roadmap. Yeah. HJ standing for Hero's Journey. So hjroadmap.com. And we got lots of good stuff going on with a community forum and ability to sign up for groups and partnership pages where those who are out there trying to help others love to get connected and share resources and refer people back and forth because it takes more than one modality to reach everyone. And we're all out there trying to help each other. So love to participate and partner with that.
Okay. And I put your link in the description if anybody needs it.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, have a great
Blessings,
week, and
gentlemen.
I'll see you in a week for part 3.
See you in
See
a
you in a
week.
week. Looking forward.